All right. Good morning to some, good afternoon to others. I'm Elliot Weiner, the ITSEC 2023 Conference Chair. I'm here today representing the National Training and Simulation Association, our beloved NTSA. Today, we're excited to host a webinar on the NTSA's initiatives to support our future and current workforce. For those new to NTSA, we're a nonprofit association dedicated to facilitating dialogue between government, industry, and academia on topics related to providing the best possible modeling, simulation, and training systems for our warfighters, our first responders, and critical infrastructure professionals. We host a portfolio of events each year, the last of which is ITSEC, the largest training and simulation conference and exposition of its kind in the world, which will be held in Orlando beginning on November 28th. We invite you to check out the agenda for this year's exciting conference on www.itsec.org. Today, we're pleased to give you a preview of ITSEC 2023. We're welcoming our government, industry, and academic colleagues from around the country and the world. On Monday morning at the conference, we will host members of the Modeling and Simulation Congressional Caucus. Members of the caucus will be with us for several hours after the special event to tour the exhibit hall and talk with our participants. The conference also hosts events at a real broad range of them, from our ecosystem of learning activities for high school and college students to scholarships, papers, tutorials, workshops, special events. We've been working all year and really excited about the program that we have for you this year. So I would like to recognize this year's lead service, the U.S. Army, led by Ms. Karen Saunders, the Program Executive Officer, Simulation Training Instrumentation, PEO STRI. I'm so grateful to Ms. Saunders' strong leadership, creative approach, and unwavering support this year. I've spent a lot of time with Ms. Saunders, and she's just truly been amazing what the Army and her has supported the conference this year. Joining her today are the other lead service executives. Our SEAV service executives, Captain Tim James, Commanding Officer, United States Navy, Naval Air Warfare Center, Training Systems Division. Colonel Marcus Reynolds, United States Marine Corps, Program Manager for Training Systems, Marine Corps Systems Command. And the Air Force Executive, Colonel Matt Ryan, United States Air Force, Chief Simulators Program Office, Air Force Material Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Each of them will be providing a few minutes of remarks, previewing their thoughts on the upcoming conference. And then afterwards, we're going to be happy to answer some of the questions that participants sent in advance, as well as take some more questions in real time. So the webinar is scheduled for an hour. We're going to maintain that timeline. I'm going to crack that whip, so to speak, to make sure that we respect everybody who's participating and make sure that we maintain on time. So now I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Karen Saunders for a few minutes of her remarks. Ms. Saunders?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Elliot, for hosting the webinar this morning. To all you industry that are out there, I'm very excited and honored to be the principal for the Army, as the Army is the lead service for ITSEC this year. I'm very excited. This is a great year for the Army. The Chief of Staff of the Army and the Undersecretary have declared FY23 as the year of digital transformation for the Army. And so what PEO STRI and the rest of the Army element will have on the floor at ITSEC and all the panels, and I'll talk to the specific to those in a couple minutes, is really how we are digitally transforming the way we're doing training in the modeling and simulation domain. So I would encourage all of you to come to the PEO STRI booth, where what we're going to have represented is all of our modernization programs that are fielded today, like IEW-TPT, the Intelligence and Electronic Warfare Tactical Proficiency Trainer, as well as the Persistent Cyber Training Environment. And then very large program that will start to field in later on in FY24, and that's the Synthetic Training Environment. We're demonstrating our footprint around the world through institutional, home station, and combat training centers, as well as to all of our allies and partners. We do have over 300,000 products fielded throughout the world, and we will have a major representation of those on the floor in our ITSEC booth. So I really would encourage you to come to the Army booth. With respect to some of the challenges that we're facing in the Army as we're going through this digital transformation. The Army and really the Department of Defense is transitioning from or into LSCO, large-scale combat operations. And as we look at the LSCO environment, we're adding on capabilities more than just air, ground, and maritime, but we're looking at including cyber and space into this multi-domain operation. And not only looking at how we train, but looking across the spectrum of cooperation, competition, and then leading into conflict, and how training and mission rehearsal really supports that full spectrum. So the challenges we're looking at is the complexity of the environment, scaling up to much larger training environments, whereas now for the Army, the division is the unit of action, if you will. And then, as I said, looking across the spectrum and not just focusing on conflict, but moving to the left and looking at the competition phase, and before that the cooperation phase. Some of the key technologies that I'm going to be looking for, and my PMs are more than happy to talk to industry about, are going to be in the AI, ML, and intelligent tutoring domain. We're always looking to see how we can have AI help us automate our models and our behaviors, automate how we do terrain, how we can dynamically shape terrain, as well as help us in decision support systems. We're always looking for how to do immersive and multisensory, providing a better experience in the AR, VR domain for our soldiers. That's key. Cyber and intel training. We do have the Army, and in the case of cyber, we have the joint cyber solution. And so looking at how to expand those environments and making them more mature and more relevant as we're focusing on the competition to conflict domain. A new area that our Chief of Staff of the Army is talking about quite a bit is embedded training. And that means providing training, squad training and above, individual squad and above, on the combat platforms. So we're looking to talk to people about solutions in that domain as well. Terrain is always a topic. We are leveraging 3D terrain within the synthetic training environment, and the quality of terrain, how it is processed, and how it is further refined within the constructive domain is we're always looking for capabilities that help us more quickly allow us to consume terrain for our simulation models. Some of the key panels I'd like to tee up, as the Army is the senior, as the lead service this year. The Fireside Chat will be sponsored by the Army, and I'm very honored that my boss, Honorable Doug Bush, will be part of the Fireside Chat. He is the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. And then his partner on the Fireside Chat will be General Brito, who is our current TRADOC commander. They will be talking about the way training is going for the Army, their outlook, and the way they believe training will continue to progress in a multi-domain environment. And then the moderator for that Fireside Chat will be the Honorable Katrina McFarland, who is a former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition, and she's the co-chairman on the Army Science Board right now. So really quality members, and it'll be a great discussion at the Fireside Chat. Also, we've got a digital transformation panel, which will be hosted by the Principal Deputy for ASALT, Mr. Bush's deputy, Mr. Young Bang, and then our Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Data Engineering and Software, Ms. Jen Swanson. So they'll be hosting a digital transformation panel, which I think will be really good, because they'll be talking about the policies and the initiatives that that ASALT is working. And I think I'm going to be on the panel too, so I'll be able to give specifics on what STRI is doing to in the training digital transformation domain. But they'll be able to talk about the way the Army is going, and just so you all are aware, the Army Secretary is about ready to sign out a software modernization directorate for the Army, and so they'll be able to talk a little bit about that software directive that the Secretary is putting out. For the first time ever, we have an NCO panel that is being put together by my senior enlisted advisor, Sergeant Major Tom Dow. That'll be a great panel to hear from senior and
Well, we seem to have a few technical difficulties, and we lost Ms. Saunders. We will work to get her back, but we'll keep moving right along here. So we thank Ms. Saunders for her comments. Well, there'll be some more. We hope we can get her back for some questions. I'm going to pass it now over to Captain Tim James for him to make some remarks. Captain James.
Oh, hold on. So we've got Ms. Saunders back. Are you back up? Maybe not. All right, so I'll go on. Very excited to be a part of ITSEC this year. Agenda's too rich for any one person to attend as per norm. It's great to be in any conferences where you get to walk around and see all the shiny toys, but something that sets ITSEC apart from others are the 200 hours of professional development we're bringing, with 148 papers, 44 special events, 31 tutorials, 8 workshops, all that. So hats off to Elliot, Annie, Debbie, the whole conference team of volunteers. They're able to pull this together. It really is a year-long effort to get to where we are. Navy's very excited to have 7 of our flag officers attending this year. Hopefully, it looks like the budget question marks and competing conferences have all smoothed out. We're going to be bringing our brand new Air Force's Admiral Verissimo, the new N98, who's in charge of requirements and funding, our new NETSI, who's in charge of naval education and training, as well as Sinatra, who's probably, at least in my world, got the #1 high-vis focus area for training right now on pilot production. And our nominated SWOBOS, head of all of surface warfare, coming out as well. One thing that we started last year that we're going to continue this year was other transaction authority. We've already put out a call for white papers to try and fit into the theme. We're trying to make ITSEC even more valuable than it always has been, and really maximizing that interaction with government industry on the single biggest collection of all those experts at any one given time and place. So last year we had a very successful event, over 36 papers received, 6 of which we found by walking the floor itself, resulting in 4 awards. So this year we're going to do that OT effort again through our NASC consortium. We already put that out. It's about artificial intelligence and how we're going to make the business of acquisition better with RFP development and then one day evaluation. We're going to see if we can't move the needle on that, as well as we're going to take it a step forward since we've started on that OT route. And we're also looking at a way to streamline CRADAs, so cooperative research and development agreements. I tried to set that unachievable goal of just walking around with pre-signed CRADAs that we could hand out by all of our acquisition leads. We got really close to that. We can get a letter of intent. So the PDs are going to be walking around looking for areas that we're in the lab managers that we need to coordinate with the industry on closer. and streamline that approach to getting those signed documents. So please hit up our folks that are walking around if you're interested in that. Matter of fact, just announced that at PULT yesterday, and it looks like we already have our first one. So very excited about the ability to speed our collaboration with industry. Special event for this year with the Navy that we're happy to announce is that we've got some actual Navy training officers at the 06 level that are coming from around the fleet to tell the ITSEC community what they need and what's hurting their head right now. So Fleet Forces is going to be moderating a panel of 06s from Strike Group 4, Traeger Land, Top Gun, and as well as one of the F-18 Commodores. So right straight from the requirement where the rubber meets the road on what's hurting the fleet's head. So very excited to see what they have. So please start thinking of those hard questions now, because we're at the end of the WEP here at the working capital ESH4 level, and we're responding to that requirement that starts with those users and funnels its way through the system. So we're excited to be there right at the beginning where they start getting that light bulb going off in their head as they walk the floor or sit in the panels and see what the art of the possible is. With that, I'll yield my time and pass it over to, I think, Marines next.
Thank you, Captain James. Yeah, it looks like Colonel Reynolds is not on right now, so we'll keep on rolling.
I'm on.
Oh, you're on. I'm sorry, Colonel Reynolds. I didn't see it. Oh, excellent. So thank you, Captain James, and now I'll pass it over to Colonel Marcus Reynolds for his remarks. Colonel Reynolds.
Yeah, I have a little technical difficulty here, but yeah, I'm dialed in. So happy to be here. Looking forward to ITSEC. Biggest things for the Marine Corps, looking at with our change of posture in Indo-PACOM and 3-MES adjustment for force posture alignment, we're moving to Guam and stand up capabilities there, which we're going to be bringing live virtual constructive training there to support the training for Marines across the Indo-PACOM region. And we'll be also working with our joint partners out there with Japan, Korea, Singapore, and Thailand, and basically the whole Indo-PACOM region. It gives us a lot of capabilities that we didn't have before with Guam, and moving up to CNMI to give us the training capabilities that just had been a shortfall in the Indo-PACOM region of responsibility. And so over the next 4 years, we're really going to be leaning into our live virtual constructive training to support that effort. With our pacing threats, it's never been more important for training, especially in the Pacific. And we're looking forward to partnering with industry to help us bridge the gap that's been there for so many years. We are fielding more efforts with the force-on-force next, and that provides more combat realism, enabling the Fleet Marine Forces to train as a fight. The Marine Corps Tactical Instrumented Systems capability provides a real-time simulated instrumented training environment. We're not tied to one partner for that. Our SOB is a prime for the base capability, but our weapon surrogates is open to all vendors. We also have our Federation for LVC, Live Virtual Constructive Training, that we're doing with the joint force. So it's not just the Marine Corps, it's all services that we're leveraging on that. So there's lots of opportunities there. We will have our booth set up this year with our sponsorship partner, which is Training Education Command. And so you'll see a lot of our new and emerging capabilities that we're trying to get after right there. And you'll have the opportunity to work, ask the questions from our requirement sponsor more so this year than in previous years. So really looking forward to having our resource sponsor there with us. And I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for industry to engage with us and TCOM. So with all that, I think that's all I have for the Marine Corps. Pending any questions.
Thank you, Colonel Reynolds. Really appreciate that. And now we'll pass over to Colonel Matt Ryan for his remarks.
Hey, good morning, Elliot. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to our stakeholders. So looking forward to ITSEC this year. Have a lot on the docket again. Although we handed the baton off to Ms. Saunders in the Army from last year, being in the lead role, we still got our DAF panel. And this year we've got more senior leaders, GOs and SCSs from the Air Force attending ITSEC than we've ever had in the past. So this will be, and I think that's indicative of the emphasis that's happening right now from senior leaders in the Air Force on training. So in particular, hopefully folks have seen that there is a new cross-cutting enabler that has been stood up by the SECAF. And these are complementary activities to his operational imperatives, which of course, as the name implies, these are the things top of mind for the Secretary of the Air Force. So the new cross-cutting operational enabler that he has stood up is the training and test COE. And so really, that is the SECAF wants to have some emphasis and focus on how do we, as a Department of the Air Force, ensure that we continue to maintain a strategic asymmetric advantage over our adversaries when it comes to training. That has traditionally been something that we have held that position of having a wide margin or advantage there of our operator training over our adversaries, and we want to maintain that. So a lot of focus there, and you'll get to hear more about that at ITSEC, although that activity has just kicked off, so don't have every detail in place just yet. But there, I think that shows the focus that the department has on making sure that we understand our training capabilities. For panels at the conference this year, we'll have, of course, our Department of the Air Force panel again. So really good representation there. We've got our Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans and Programs once again. So, of course, that is very pertinent and of interest for all of you to hear directly from him about what he's thinking and what he sees as Air Force priorities, because that's where investments are going from the Air Force. We'll have our AATC commander there. So, of course, that's foundational. Our pilot pipeline, all of our aircrew pipeline runs through him. We'll also have our Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, and we'll also have Space and Training Readiness Commander on that panel. So a great opportunity to hear from some of our senior leaders and what they're thinking with regard to training imperatives and test imperatives as well, and how to make investments and get after some of our gaps there. And then we'll also have our digital material management panel this year. So great representation there with Dr. Costa and General Bartolome from our Weapons Directorate down at Eglin. We'll also have some expertise from Chris Garrett and Lenny Delegati as well, representing on that panel. So another great opportunity to hear from senior leaders and just senior or expert thought on that subject matter. So looking forward to hearing from them as well. And then there'll be an opportunity to hear more from a little bit closer to the working level operators with our MAGCOM panel. So that'll be an 06 level panel. So repeat that just as we had last year. So looking forward to hearing from all of our MAGCOMs and what are the problems that they need for you to go solve, where are their gaps and challenges. And then my team will be giving our acquisition update. So you'll get to hear about all the acquisition activities that are coming down the pipe, where we need investments, where we need research and development, those sorts of things. When you come see us in the booth, of course, we'll have our position in the quad booth again this year, just like we always do. You'll get to see good representation from some of the things that are happening with the Air Force Research Lab. So they'll be represented there in the booth. And then from us, you'll see a lot of emphasis on joint simulation environment. And it's on SCARS as well, our Simulator Common Architecture Requirements and Standards program that we are running. So those will be kind of centerpiece activities that you'll get to hear about in our booth, and you'll hear more about that as well in the acquisition update. And the other thing I think you'll see in our booth is a lot of synergy between ourselves and the NOC AD booth for the folks there from the Navy that we are collaborating with, in particular on joint simulation environment. So those are some of the big things that you're going to hear about from us, and priorities, tracking with the TNT COE, that training and test COE, and those are some of the flagship programs that you're going to hear about from us. With that, I will hand the baton back to Elliot.
Thank you, Colonel Ryan. It sounds awesome. And I can tell you, all year long, I've been all these planning meetings, the services have been so engaged. I mean, they're so engaged every year, but just so engaged this year. And, the range of special events, everything we have lined up, it's just going to be, as I've heard a few of you say already, more content than one person could possibly go through, but we want to keep you all super busy. So we worked really hard to do that. So what we're going to do now is move on to some questions. There were quite a number of pre-submitted questions from the attendees, or from the folks attending the webinar, and we appreciate them. As you might imagine, with ChatGPT, our buddy, our new buddy now, most of them were around generative AI, but I'm not going to be asking our panelists all about generative AI. So there were just too many of them, but we will start with one. So this is probably for each panelist, I would say. And this came from someone prior to the webinar. What is one key security or operational concern you have with generative AI as we continue to advance and expect increased participation of AI in the M&S industry? So what's your one key security or operational concern you have with generative AI? And anybody can just jump in, or I can call names, whatever you'd like. All right, Captain James, I'm putting you on the spot.
All right, thanks. Always thrilled. I don't know that I have just one concern. It's, to me personally, such a new field. We keep trying to use it in different ways. Like I mentioned, we're doing the OT right now to see how crazy the response can be when it starts getting involved in our industry. I am always concerned about anytime you take a human out of the loop, the garbage in, garbage out possibilities. So depending on where these generative AI source their data, it'll come across as pretty authoritative. But if it got bad data coming in, and then we have a brand new sailor trusting this output is gospel, but we didn't do a good enough job cleaning the data that went into that generative AI, we can make things bad in a hurry, as it can generate a lot of content very quickly and proliferate that around. So always concerned about the security of data, right? That'd be another vector for attack to our sailors training, tactics, techniques, and procedures, is just flooding the source with bad information. Then it becomes really hard to undo. And then you put twice as many human hours into cleaning it up. I think we go into it smartly, we can avoid that. But I've played around with chat enough to know that it's not always right when you ask it a question, but it comes across pretty confident. It's like my 4-year-old, right? He will give you an answer, and you got to know enough to know when he's wrong.
That is such a great statement. I teach an ethics class, and if you don't mind, I'm going to lift that. It sounds very confident. I'm going to use that on my students tomorrow in class. Ms. Saunders, any thoughts on that? Your key security or operational concern around generative AI?
So I think Tim hit it on the right square, right? It's not necessarily the algorithms, but it's the data, right? And making sure you've got data integrity and really configuration of all the data that goes into the algorithms that are putting an output. I think that's probably my biggest concern. And so whether it's for decision support tools or for automating behaviors or for processing terrain for dynamic changes on the battlefield, you've got to have integrity of data to be able to work through the algorithms to give you the right output. I don't have a 4-year-old story, but I think the same goes for my 21-year-old.
I'm right there with you on that one. I have a 23-year-old. All right. Colonel Ryan, what are your key security or operational concerns around AI?
So a lot of similar concerns with the data. I think there's 2 aspects to it. One would be adversaries, intentionally poisoning the data. So setting you up with poor training data purposefully, or just having an offset from I guess, your intended what use for it, and maybe your training data is offset from supporting that a little bit, so you end up having kind of a distributive problem, if you will. So certainly those are problems. Absolutely, the security piece, the exposure of that data, and whether or not you could be, again, from an adversary perspective, could they query your training data somehow and expose techniques, capabilities through that. So there's an aspect there. And then I think there is inherently a risk with AI and how we use it in the mod sim world. And how much are we willing to take a risk of training autonomy with simulated data? Certainly a very risky proposition in my mind. Implies that you've got to have a lot of confidence in your V&V capabilities with regard to your simulation, so that you have confidence that your simulation data looks like real data from the real world. But of course, in some cases, it's very challenging to get real world data for the things that we're interested in learning about. And I think that there brings the temptation to want to use simulation data to feed your AI with, right? So significant risk there in my mind, operationally speaking. So I think those are kind of the two big items is, again, as the two previous folks answered, it's all about the data that you're feeding into the model, right? And is it data that you can have confidence in? And of course, as you get a more complex model, it's very hard to understand in many cases, why is it giving the outcomes it's giving? So significant challenges there, I think, as we ramp up the use of AI across the board with mod sim and training and test capabilities. Over.
Thank you. Colonel Reynolds, what is one key security operational concern you have with generative AI? Did we lose him? Colonel Reynolds, are you there?
Here. Hey. Okay.
We've got you. Go ahead, sir. Oh, we seem to have lost Colonel Reynolds. Okay. So let's move on to another question here, and it's not going to be generative AI, so we want to be a little bit different. So I've heard a few people mention, joint forces, things like that. So a question that came in early was, what actions are taking place to create consistency across the DoD to ensure interoperability, as well as the ability to leverage assets more readily? So it's a pretty broad question, right? Something along the lines of what we're doing in our simulation environments, perhaps, or even just in joint exercises, or so basically just kind of speak to interoperability, in the context of joint operations. And let's start with Ms. Saunders this time, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine, Ellie. Yeah, I don't want to be bureaucratic. It almost turns. It being interoperable across joint forces, so with my fellow services as well as multinational, our partners and allies, our requirements in all of my modernization programs as appropriate. And so having the requirement is key, because that's what I'm tested and evaluated against. But from a technical perspective, I think that's where I guess the rubber meets the road, and the way we're approaching as we our synthetic training environment, leveraging industry standards, modular open systems approach, where we're able to integrate or interoperate with our fellow services. I know at the joint level, the joint LVC Confederation, right now the Army does not have a combat model that's part of that federation, and so we're working with the joint staff to assure that that our combat model within the synthetic training environment is included and replaces the what currently is JCATS. So I think it starts with requirements, of which the Army has them. and then obviously how you approach you develop your technical architecture so that you can more easily interoperate with other services, whether it's at the data level or at the architecture level. And then with respect to our partners and allies, having the requirement for exportability is key. Organization is having to provide another combat model that the Army doesn't even use, and so having the requirement to be exportable and including that in your from the design of your system will ensure that we're able to provide our allies and partners the ability to buy our systems as well as interoperate with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one little, by the way, note to all our attendees here. Come on, I want to see some questions in the Q&A. I've only got a few so far, so let's go. You didn't know you're attending this webinar. I am professor, by the way. We're in class here, so come on, let's get some questions going. All right. Let's see if Colonel Reynolds, have we gotten you back by any chance on audio? Don't think we have Colonel Reynolds. Okay, Colonel Ryan, I'm going to put that question over to you. So comments about, creating consistency in joint operations, interoperability. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure, thanks, Elliot. So two things come to mind for me. One is at the department level for DoD. And I expect you may hear about this from one of our panelists, Ms. Baxter. So the Undersecretary for Training under OSD PNR actually is emphasizing right now some activity that is focused on interoperability across the services with some of our training capabilities. So there's actually a DoD instruction that is being drafted that I expect will be published sometime this next calendar year. And really a lot of discussion on how can we have common databases, right? Navy, Air Force, Army, all of us have developed different databases. Terrain would be one example. There is only one Earth, right? Why do we all need to have our different databases of the same entity or object, right? So things like that, how can we knock that down, have a single authoritative database that everybody works from and contributes to and gets to leverage and take advantage of. And then standards from an interoperability perspective is another topic. And in some cases, just definition of terms. So we speak a common language amongst ourselves as a mod sim community across all of DoD. So that's one item that comes to mind. Certainly a lot of emphasis in the Air Force on interoperability. Everybody recognizes that as we're standing up things like ABMS on the Air Force side, that is really all about interoperation or systems of systems, kill chains, kill webs, pick your buzzword that you want to use. But it's about interoperability at the end of the day and being able to pass data and consume data from one another in order to prosecute the mission and prosecute targets. So a lot of emphasis from that perspective. Very specifically within the Air Force training capability that we're developing in my team. Again, I talked about it earlier, the SCARS program. A big impetus behind standing up that program was the realization that, hey, a lot of our SIMs were developed 10, 20, 30 years ago, and they were developed in a stovepipe. They were never meant to interoperate together. And now in the new way of doing business, in conflict, we need to be able to train the way we fight, which means we have to interoperate in training. So that's really what SCARS is all about, is setting forth that common architecture, those common standards, so that we can even bring together our legacy simulators, but especially for our future emerging training capabilities. Let's ensure that those are built from the ground up to be able to interoperate with one another and to be able to interoperate ideally with our joint partners and then also our allies across the globe for all the same reasons. Over.
Thank you, Colonel Ryan. Captain James, your thoughts on interoperability in joint missions?
Sure. So I know the question specifically was joint, so I'll talk about that, but I do want to throw in there that we'll never just fight a joint war again. So coalition interoperability, we are woefully in the hurt locker there. A lot of it's the same problems we have joint, but blown out, and an extra layer of bureaucracy put on there. But I tell you, here at NOC-TSD, we've become quite proficient at making any two systems talk. We used to think interoperability, can I get the Xbox to talk to the Wii or whatever? And we've been able to crack that nut. Problem is, those are one-off solutions. And as long as we allow everybody that has a paycheck to pick their own standard, to pick their own system, we'll only be able to solve them at the point, at one-off. What we need to do, and pay attention, because you won't hear me praise the Air Force very often, but I saw them once mandate a standard across all of Air Force and Space Force for one of their communication standards. And I think that's what DoD, what the entire government, if they could, needs to do to really help us move the needle on this, is we got to mandate a standard. That there's not a perfect one, or else everybody would just automatically pick it. So we got to take the best known at the time and move forward with it, because there's more benefit than there is badness of moving out. Big fan of allowing the people to be creative, but putting them in a box so those creative boxes can still connect to each other. And we can't just think of two simulators. We're going LVC, so we've got to have different standards and approaches, guide rails that can connect the live to the virtual to the constructive worlds. So pick one that makes sense and move out, and we'll make the best of it. But until then, we're kind of doing these one-off Band-Aid approaches on, you tell me the exact two systems need to talk, and I'll make it happen. That's easy. That's just time and money. We're not creating a new language here. But until we can get DoD to limit our options, we're going to keep struggling, in my opinion. So I think that would move the interoperability discussion along. Right now, I think a lot of people are hesitant to pull the trigger because, like I said, there's pros and cons to every standard. But if you allow everybody to have every standard, you end up with a lot more cons than pros. So I would love to see that, but that's 15 pay grades above my level. So I will pass that note up again. But I don't see any movement aggressively enough in that direction, in my opinion. And it becomes 10 times as worse when you get an entire another country involved, because now not only are you talking, can my Mac and PC talk, but now you're getting these different classification levels too, and subsets within classification levels. So it's not just can the trons talk, but are they allowed to talk via policy?
Thank you. Okay, so I know we're having some connection issues with folks today, and I do appreciate everybody being patient with that. The price of doing a webinar with folks all over the world and trying to bring in government and industry and academia into one platform, I think we all know we've all become sort of Swiss Army knives between Zoom and Teams and everything else. So if you are, I realize some of the people might be a little frustrated, but appreciate that trying to find one platform that all of us can hook into, it's probably not really possible. So the fact that we've actually got 2 or 3 and we're getting comments is actually probably pretty good. So there's a question that came in live.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Colonel Reynolds. You there?
Yeah, I think I finally cracked the code on this one.
All right. So you know what? I will pass this next question to, we'll start with you. Okay. So we have a live question. That was pretty good. I liked it. So the one question came in that Ms. Saunders alluded to the need to dynamically shape terrain. Could each panelist elaborate on their thoughts on how we need to push the envelope on how we represent the real world in synthetic modeling and simulation environments? Each service has some push, and obviously joint service as well, to create synthetic environments, extended reality environments. Creating the real world, the actual terrain, the geospatial stuff is very important. So what are your thoughts on what we need to do? How accurate does it need to be? What technologies are out there? Are you aware of stuff? Kind of just your thoughts in general on that. And we'll start with Colonel Reynolds on this one.
All right. Thank you, Elliot. So for the Marine Corps, we're moving to the joint tools. So I believe the platform is going to be One World that the Army uses as part of their piece that supports the joint live virtual constructive training environment. For that environment, and I believe a lot of what they're using is got to be updated in real time. So just having something out there that lingers, and you've seen this before. If you go to Google Maps versus Microsoft's Bing Maps versus the Apple Maps, you'll see there's different refresh rates on each one of those platforms. And I believe the most relevant one right now is Google, because of as much as they reach out to. And we really have to have the refresh rate to make it relevant, because just not only in the training environment, but actually in the actual real world operations environment, and continuously updating that will make it important for the joint force to basically train in real time before they go in harm's way.
Excellent, thank you. Colonel Ryan, you have any thoughts on terrain and visualization in synthetic environments?
Yeah, Elliot. So on this one, I think, as you might guess, given the difference between Air Force and Army, and in some cases Marines, there's a little difference in the resolution or the fidelity you need as far as terrain representation when your eyeballs are being simulated at 40,000 feet versus 6 feet off the ground. But one area that is of significant interest for us from an environment representation perspective is the electromagnetic spectrum. That is where really the rubber meets the road for us, is being able to present that in a way that our simulated sensors can consume that spectrum just like they would in the real world, or as close to it as they would in the real world, and give our operators that are in that virtual environment hopefully the same experience they would have to interact with, to interdict red capabilities that might be present in that EMS, for simulated red capabilities to interdict our blue capabilities in the EMS, and to be able to degrade one another in a way that we believe is most representative of what could be a peer conflict in the future, to have that highly representative of the density and diversity of signals in that space across the entire spectrum that our sensors are able to exploit. So for us in the Air Force side, I think that's a lot of emphasis that we are putting on our environments right now as we're thinking about how to develop, in particular JSC, is what features do we need to take into account, again, so that our operators can go and execute a kill chain in that environment and have it be highly representative of what it would be like if they were actually in conflict. So pretty significant challenge there to do that at scale. And by at scale, I mean number of entities that are emitting in the space, and also a large geographic area so that it's representative, in particular, of a PACOM type scenario where you have a huge geography that you've got to think about. So those are kind of the things that come top of mind for me when I'm thinking about the environment and what we're having to get after from a resolution or capability perspective. Over.
Excellent. Thank you. Captain James, your thoughts on terrain visualization representation?
Sure. If I remember the question, it was, we have one Earth, so why can't we have one terrain map, if you will? That's a great vision for the future. Our problem is it depends on your mission and your training objective on where you want to put your calories there. So if I'm driving a ship in the middle of the ocean, I really don't care what the terrain of the seafloor or the mountain range or anything else is. But if I'm doing a sub mission or a terrain following flight or something like that, or a targeting mission rehearsal, I need some extremely high fidelity in certain areas. So in my perfect world, we would have a 100% fidelity, physics-based terrain model that could somehow scale out when you're not needing the fidelity in a certain area. Kind of like I have streaming services, and when my video gets choppy at home, I can drop it down from 1080 to 720 or whatever the resolution options are, because I don't need it. Or to have some kind of tech that is smart enough to only render the area that impacts the mission I'm paying attention to. But as we're moving to these very exquisite environments like JSE, the bandwidth and the computing power is astronomical, and we just can't do that everywhere. So we've got to find a way to get to that one perfect, Earth digital twin, which includes not just physical, and we've been talking about that, but for us, all the electromagnetic field as well. because that's the future of warfare. Is not going to be clean, right? We're not just going to launch missiles at each other. There's going to be all kinds of electromagnetic warfare. So having a model that can do all this at once, but you can scale in the fidelity as you want so that your computer doesn't choke, or so that you can connect to devices that are so far apart that the speed of light becomes a communication problem. That's a PhD plus level problem for us. But I would love to see a single model that we would all agree on. But in order for us all to agree, it has to meet everybody's requirement, which means it needs to be perfect, right? We need a real Earth replica that computing power is just not going to support right now.
Excellent. Thank you. So I do want to say Ms. Saunders wants to thank her fellow service executives and all the attendees today. She got pulled away to something else and had to drop off our meeting, but told us to keep moving forward, and so we're going to do that. So a question came in ahead of time. It was a pre-question that's sort of near and dear to my heart, and because I'm the moderator, I get to ask the question, so you all get to bear with me. So where do you see extended reality, XR, so virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, whatever reality you want to choose, being used the most in your individual programs? So why don't we start with Colonel Ryan this time?
So XR technologies are kind of one of those things that I think in the future are going to be somewhat ubiquitous. You'll be able to use them for numerous applications, whether it's aircrew training, maintenance training, all kinds of different things. Of course, those are kind of the wheelhouse that I focus on in my job jar. Really, I think some of our challenges with some of the XR is, one, being able to have that technology in classified spaces in some cases is limiting for us currently. Those are some of the things we're trying to learn about. And then just ensuring that the technology meets the actual requirements for the operator from a visual acuity perspective and matching that to the particular mission at hand. As Captain James was just saying, depending upon your mission, you need a little bit something different out of a very similar tool, right? So a maintenance training use of XR technology has a different requirement for a visual acuity perspective from a flying training mission perspective. So in many cases, at least. But I do think that it's a technology that we'll see more and more of. And in particular, of course, the thing that probably all of us are looking forward to, I know for me, and for sure this is the case, is I see it as a key to affordability. So we can actually scale some of the capabilities we're interested in. Some of the other visual system capabilities are they're awfully expensive to acquire and then to maintain over time. Whereas XR gives you the opportunity for a very high quality visual experience and a more immersive experience in many cases for a lower bill that the department can actually sustain over time. So I think it'll be widespread as we move ahead. As the technology continues to mature, it's just going to become more and more ubiquitous across at least my portfolio is the way I see things happening. Over.
Thank you. Colonel Reynolds, where do you see XR being used the most in your programs?
Yes, yeah, so we have new and emerging requirements coming out, especially for maintenance trainers. And so we're taking a really hard look on how we can use mixed reality to support that type of training, especially on the flight line to support Marines in a data degraded area. So obviously the platform is going to have to basically be self-capable, so you don't have to rely on the cloud until you get into a better area. But in the airfields that could be in the Pacific or in different areas that definitely don't have the backbone to support that, we're really looking at mixed reality as the systems of itself. If you look at like the IBAS system or HoloLens, just something that's lightweight that can support that type of training or support for real world operations. So basically a dual use case for both of them. Over.
All right. Captain James, what are your thoughts on XR in your programs?
Yeah, so the different reality modes are everywhere now, and we're trying to put them in everything. Right now, kind of the state of tech, whether it's the cost, the fragility, the bandwidth, et cetera, is got us more limited than toward the entry level training in a building type environments, because the places that we operate day to day are pretty abusive to fragile tech, right? Whether it's the EM spectrum on a boat, or the fact that you're surrounded by sharp metal edges. You know, we break a lot of equipment when we put it out there in the operational environment, which is where we are also trying to move training to, right? We have to take training to the sailor, not make the sailor, you know, go to the training, so we can keep relevant, immediate, et cetera. But in our long-term vision of where these different XR techs are going to take us, is pretty exciting. So you'll be able to do long distance support. So instead of having to ship equipment back, if you want to do maintenance, you can have a SME, you know, piggyback with you, and you can do some of that I or D level maintenance deployed instead of back home. You'll be able to do real-time training, or have a pub overlay so you can visually look at a system and see what's wrong with it. It can do compliance on making sure you're doing all the steps, auto grading, you know, sending up the warning flag, so we can reduce other touch time elements like quality assurance. It lets you dry run really complicated events before we actually do them. You know, we have a MERT system right now is the only way to train doing torpedo onloads on our newer submarines. Otherwise, you know, traditionally we just learn that OJT with a no kidding real armed weapon. That's no way to go through life. So the ability to dry run, to extend training out to the sailor, to do step-by-step instructions, OJT, compliance, all that's very exciting. But what we need to do is get the computing power makes it able to get the packages smaller. We're going to turn right around and beef them back up to make sure that they are sailor-proof, if you will, as we're running through flight decks or steel hallways, et cetera, so that we're not treating these like consumables, because we won't be able to afford all the extended reality we want to push out there. But I see one day we're going to get there, and it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be standard issue that here's your visual and haptic also issue XR equipment, so that we can train you on anything, anywhere. And that's another thing I'll be looking around for at ITSEC, is each year we're getting a little bit better demos on haptics. Real excited about the future of that, to take to the next level. So it's not just visual, but be able to get that tactile feel, because now I don't need a full-on cockpit or whatever the training system is. If I can just get goggles and gloves and sit in a chair in the back of the ready room, I can practice on anything. All I need is software. That's going to really move us forward, and our limited space and budget futures, being able to put all those different training apps onto one, you know, visual and haptic type system. Sky's the limit when we get to that point.
All right. Thank you very much. So we've covered quite a bit of stuff. You're going to see a lot of this stuff at the conference. Generative AI, as we mentioned, XR, joint operations, a lot of different panels. So really, you know, take a look across at everything, and we really encourage that. There's so much content, it's hard for me to even just sort of pick out ones. We've got about 2 minutes left. So I think what I'll do is we'll go around to each of our service executives really quickly. You got about 30, 45 seconds, and list one thing at the conference that, you know, very high, that you think an attendee should attend. If they can only attend one thing, what would be the one thing they go to? So let's start with Colonel Ryan.
Well, of course, you should come and take a look at our booth and attend our acquisition update. I mean, what else is there? That's the center of the universe there, of course. No, definitely do look forward to meeting with everybody. And I do encourage you to attend the acquisition update. Really, that's a great opportunity for our industry partners to come and see what it is that's on our minds as far as needs that we have. So I look forward to seeing you there, getting to interact and getting to exchange ideas. Thanks.
Captain James.
Yeah, similar answer. So we are trying to capitalize on the greatness of having this entire industry in one place at one time. So we've changed the purpose of our quad booth. Instead of showing you baubles that we've built, or even worse, showing industry baubles that they've built themselves, we're going to turn that into an interactive experience, where we're going to show you the fleet's head hurters and problems that they're looking for people to help solve, as well as we want industry to tell us how that we can be better partners to solve these problems with them. So we're looking for a two-way communication. We're going to have people to talk to, or, you know, drop boxes for your ideas. We're really hoping to capture on information of the only time we're going to have that rich environment of industry, academia, and government all together. So please come to the Quad booth and give us your best ideas, or take away our head hurters and tell us how to solve them.
All right, Colonel Reynolds.
Yeah, I would welcome everybody to come by the joint, all of our coalition partners area, to see what our joint partners are using and see how that ties to our current training capabilities that all the services in the United States are using. Obviously, come by our booth. We're going to have different themes each day by product group, and also our updates for our each product group for the briefs. Should be a great ITSEC this year. Really looking forward to seeing all of the industry out there and how they've advanced over the last year since last year. And see you guys in a couple weeks. Out.
All right, thank you. So we're at time. I want to thank our service executives, including Ms. Saunders, but thank you so much. These are all extremely busy folks, as we know, so to take an hour of their time is really, really appreciated. We will see you all at ITSEC 2023. Have a great holiday, and we'll, as Colonel Reynolds said, we'll see you all in a couple weeks here. Signing off.